Hello everyone, it's Miss O'Brien here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about rewriting trig expressions in fractional form. This is when we have it in a fractional form, we don't want it in a fractional form. How do we get there? So in class we talked about these first two tips, which were getting a difference of squares in the denominator and then using that to use a Pythagorean identity to simplify the denominator. And then I saw one student do this in class with a problem that I approached differently, which was moving the denominator to the top to get an inverse by using an inverse function, and it worked really nicely. And I've noticed that we can kind of use that on all the problems we've seen so far. And so as you're trying some at home by yourself, go ahead and give it a shot. See if this strategy will work for you too. I'm going to show you the strategy in full and all of these tips in this example problem 1 over 1 plus sine x. So go ahead and pause the video here and practice trying to get this into a form that doesn't have a fraction in it. And then when you're ready, come back, press play, and we'll go over it on the next slide. Alright, so let's get started here. So I have 1 over 1 plus sine x. My first step here is going to be to get a difference of squares in the denominator. So I'm going to put these tips down here so we can reference them as we go along. So to get a difference of squares in the denominator, I am going to multiply the denominator by 1 minus sine x. Now the important thing to remember is we don't want to change the value of this expression, we just want to rewrite it in a way that makes it look prettier. So I can't just multiply the denominator by 1 minus sine x, I need to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 1 minus sine x. Because 1 minus sine x over 1 minus sine x is the same thing, right? So it's 1. It's like multiplying by 1 here. Alright, so when I do that, I'm going to get 1 minus sine x in our numerator. And then in our denominator, I'm going to get 1 subtract sine squared x. Now if that's not immediately obvious to you, if you don't see that right away, think of what we did on Tuesday and Wednesday when we did those stations. There was one station on difference of squares. And this is just the opposite. You're going backwards. So in the difference of squares station, you were given this denominator sort of thing, and you were asked to find the factors. So you found this and this. Now you're given the two factors, and you multiply them together, and you get difference of squares. If you need to double check it, go ahead and FOIL it. So remember our FOIL, the first terms multiplied together are 1, so we get our 1 here. Our inner terms, 1 minus sine x, and then our outer terms, 1 times negative sine x, so we get 1 sine x subtract sine x, that's going to zero out, and our last term, sine x times negative sine x equals negative sine x squared. So that's how we get there. Next I'm going to use tip 2 from our from what we've been learning. Use a Pythagorean identity to simplify the denominator. This is the point where I get out my sheet of identities and look at which one seems to make sense given this denominator. Now, for this denominator, only one of those should make sense because only one of them has sine x in it, or sine squared in it, sine squared x. So that one is sine squared plus cosine squared x equals 1. And now I can see that I can get this into a form that looks very similar to this by subtracting sine squared x from both sides. So if I do that, I get cosine squared x equals 1 subtract sine squared x. From here, I can just plug in cosine, I can plug in cosine squared x with our function right here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We get 1 minus sine x from our numerator. That stays the same. Sine x. And then in our denominator, we get cosine squared x. Now I'm going to rewrite this horizontally because I think this might help us see how we can change this up and get rid of the fraction. So here I'm going to do 1 minus sine x, which is just our numerator, and then we're going to divide by 1 over cosine squared x. Now right now this should be looking familiar because we saw this a few times today. When we are dividing by a fraction, that's the same thing as multiplying by its inverse. So I can rewrite this as 1 minus sine x times cosine x squared. Because if I take the inverse of this guy right here, we're going to multiply over cosine squared x over 1, which is the same thing as cosine squared x. Now, this is no longer in fractional form, so from my perspective, I'm done. I could multiply this out and probably get something that maybe looks a little prettier and make more sense of it. Like I think you can probably get a tangent maybe in there. I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to do the math. But this would be one way to finish our answer. So leave some comments below if you guys have any questions about this, or where do you guys get stuck? Are you getting stuck when we're trying to get a difference of squares in there, or is it when we're using the trig substitutions or trig identities? Is that causing trouble? Or is it what comes afterwards? Try using this third step on some of the problems we did in class, as well as the homework problems, and see if this helps. Let me know if you have a problem that doesn't help with, and we can look at that together as well. Alright, that's it for now. Have a good day.